Very fortunate to be joined once again in person by Congressman Ro Khanna, who is here to discuss a variety of issues. Great to see you again, sir.
Always good to be on set.
Yeah, of
good
course.
to see you, sir.
So one thing that caught my attention is you have a new sort of anti-corruption plan that you have been pushing. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is courtesy of Unusual Whales, who had a breakdown of some of the core components. He says, Representative Ro Khanna has introduced a new reform plan that, number one, bans stock trading for Congress and spouses, bans ex-Congress members from lobbying Congress after they're done, imposes 12-year limits for Congress, and bans donations from lobbyists and PACs. He goes on to say that you have asked Biden to adopt these plans. So just talk to us about the key planks here and why you think this is important.
You know, whenever I put something out, I can never tell what goes viral. This one did.
Yeah.
And it's pretty common sense. I mean, there is a deficit of trust in institutions in America. Because of that, you have people coming in and offering demagoguery. We've got to fix that trust. And these are common sense reforms. I mean, make sure that after you're in Congress, you can't go lobby for the companies where you were which you were regulating. Make sure you don't have any PAC money, you don't have any lobbyist money infiltrating Congress. Have term limits both for members of Congress and Supreme Court justices. Ban stock trading, and make sure that people aren't profiting off their service. And then finally, a code of ethics for Supreme Court justices.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, you would personally not benefit from said plan, so I think it's cool that you're actually implementing it. But I'm also interested to hear about the term limit section. We actually had a discussion earlier on our show. There was a big disagreement amongst our focus group that we had of primary voters on whether we should have term limits or not. What made you come to that conclusion? Because you actually serve in the House, where seniority, right, I believe, on your side is still in place. Why should we have term limits?
Well, there are two term limits. We certainly should have them for Supreme Court justices that are out of touch with modern life. With members of Congress, I understand the argument that why don't you let the voters decide? But the reality is the Congress has less turnover these days than European monarchies, according to The Economist. There's an article that actually looked at it, because you have such a huge advantage when it comes to name ID, when it comes to fundraising. Most congressional seats are uncontested, don't have a serious test. So if you don't have some term limit, you just aren't going to have change, and you're not going to have newer voices. When people say Congress has everyone over 60, one of the reasons is it's really hard to get elected, to break through. Now, I think it is hard to do because it takes 10 years to get seniority, so you have to start fresh. But at some point, we've got to do this.
How have your colleagues received this plan, especially the elderly ones who've been there for more than 12 years? How do they feel about this?
Well, with the turbos, I've even said grandfather some folks in, or grandfather folks in terms of getting there. But we've got to make some effort in terms of reform. I think many of them just say, okay, he'll introduce it, and
they don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Then it doesn't go anywhere, and that feeds even more cynicism. And my hope is, even if you disagree with one or two of these things, at least do something. And the way we're going to get it to move is for the president and for the House and Senate to campaign on some of these issues.
Yeah.
Look,
and has there been receptivity from the president? I mean, how are you pushing the president to adopt these plans?
Well, I'm talking to a lot of his campaign team. I'm on his quote-unquote advisory board in terms of re-election. But what I've said is you can't allow Donald Trump, twice impeached, 4 times indicted, to run as the outsider. And he's going to try to say everyone is corrupt, everyone is not doing their job. And we have to show, no, there's a real difference. So let's take some key areas where we can show that difference. We won't take corporate money for our party. We aren't going to take PAC or lobbyist monies, aren't going to do that in the primaries. We're going to be for certain basic reforms on the Supreme Court. These seem to be common sense.
I want to zero in on something you said about it going viral. We've always seen that here. I appreciate that. I mean, virality isn't always everything, but the stock trade ban in particular, this one hits home at a very visceral and deep level. And yet we had learned that the president dropped one of the lines endorsing that from the State of the Union because of vociferous pushback in the House and in the Senate. And we've seen multitudes of lawmakers now introduce this. So why is this one different? Like, how can we actually get this one done? Because this is one the supermajority of Americans actually agree with.
I agree, and this is why, to the extent that it went viral, because I haven't said anything new. I mean, Abigail Spanberger has been fighting for this. Representative Ocasio-Cortez and Matt Gaetz teamed up. I'm on both of those bills. What I'm saying, though, is it's not going to pass without it being part of the campaign agenda. If you campaign on it, if you promise it to the voters, then you're going to be obligated to do it. And we have never campaigned on it. We've never had it as part of our party platform. My view is adopting this as part of the party platform is going to obligate us to do it. And no one has run on these issues, in my view, that they're very popular, and we've got to get it done. And it's a distinguishing from the other side.
I agree.
So turning to some questions we've asked you before about the Ukraine war, there's a new report from Reuters I'm reading from here that says Ukraine could get long-range missiles armed with U.S. cluster bombs. Now, you've been opposed to us arming the Ukrainians with cluster bombs in particular because, they're considered a human rights atrocity in most parts of the world. Is there any progress on trying to push forward any legislation that would block the administration from making these kinds of moves?
Well, I voted on the amendment to try to block it. I was in the small minority of House members, probably 50, 60 votes. So there's overwhelming support in the Congress for the administration. I mean, we had the vote in the House. The challenge is I don't think that those cluster bombs are making a difference on the ground, because what you have is Putin has put landmines in all of the Donbass area. It's very, very sad, but the counteroffensive because of that has been very difficult. And I'm opposed to cluster bombs, but I also don't think that it effectively is reducing the artillery disadvantage that Ukraine is at. And so I don't see why we would compromise such fundamental principles where we have the moral high ground by giving cluster bombs that aren't being very effective.
So we're at crossroads here, Congressman. The president has asked for $25 billion more. He's attached it to disaster relief program. How do you expect to vote for that? Do you have any organized effort against it? You've previously spoken about diplomacy. What's your thinking about this extra $25 billion?
I will support it. I know some of your viewers will not like the answer, but I'm always transparent. I mean, I think we have to support Ukraine while we also seek a just peace. And if we don't support them now, we're giving license for Putin to make more gains into Ukrainian territory. And I clearly believe that Putin was morally wrong and wrong under an international law. Now, if we can support Ukraine and if they can continue to make some progress, it's been hard fought progress, but some progress, then at the same time, we should be engaging our allies, France, India, others, to see a just peace.
But we haven't seen that just peace or a lot of the engagement with the allies, and instead we've actually seen consistent escalation. I mean, in considering also in the $25 billion, as I understand it, there's no checks that Congress has been able to write in, as by your own admission here, about long-range missiles, about cluster bombs, or any of this. So isn't this just a blank check for the administration to eventually just give Ukraine whatever it wants, with very little limitations in terms of their use of our own arms and our ammunition?
Well, I think President Biden has actually been fairly judicious in saying he doesn't want to escalate the war into Russian territory. He has not engaged in any way a United States military, either our Air Force or our Army. And he has been careful to say, Ukraine, look, you can take back your territory, but don't attack Russia. And my view is that he has those safeguards.
He has said those things, but Ukraine has continued to attack Russia, including drone strikes in the heart of Moscow. So I guess what we're trying to figure out is, what is the end game? What is the limiting principle? Is there a point in time where you start to threaten to withhold this aid so that you can begin to bring the parties to the table? How do you ever get to any sort of a negotiated resolution here? Because, this has obviously been just an absolute catastrophe. The number of lives that are lost and the seemingly endless nature of it is horrifying to watch.
It is horrifying. The end game is that Russia move out of the territory which they took in the Donbass. That is, they're illegally there. They have occupied that territory. They violated Ukrainian sovereignty. And we have to figure out how do we prevail on them to do that. But at the same time, we are trying to de-escalate the conflict. And there can be efforts at working towards de-escalation, working towards ceasefires in different parts of the country, while we hold firm on Ukrainian sovereignty.
So let's say this: $25 billion. The Ukrainians do with the $25 billion what they've done with the $100 billion, which is use it, make very little progress. When we're sitting here 9 months from now, and they ask for another $25 billion, what's the answer then? You give it to them again? We pursue peace? Like, what is the limiting principle on the amount of aid that we're willing to send to Ukraine?
Well, look, everything is contextual. I'm not going to sit here and say for the next 20 years we're going to be funding Ukraine. But the point is that certainly I think we have to fund them in this request. And then we've got to continue to make progress in trying to see how we get Russia out of the Donbass region and where they've violated sovereignty. My view is you can engage allies in that effort because there are allies who have a relationship with Russia closer to ours who also believe that Russia was wrong.
Right. No, absolutely. But you keep using it for. So I'm just trying to understand. You don't think a peace negotiation is possible unless Russia restores the February 24th borders and pre-invasion? If that's the case, this war is never going to end. I mean, what, do you think they've lost 100,000 people and isolated themselves from the world that they're just going to pull out from that port? Like, what level of ammunition would we even be able to supply that? I don't even know if it's possible in order to achieve that sort of solution. If that's what a diplomatic solution looks like. In your mind.
Well, yeah. That's what a just peace looks like. Now, if Ukraine has a different view, I would request, I would defer to Ukraine. And at some point, what we need to do is make sure that Ukrainian, their views, their judgment is taken into account. And, I would support what they want. But my view of what a just peace would be is Russian withdrawal. If Ukrainians come to a different conclusion, obviously they have a judgment to make.
I got to pick up there, though, because their conclusion is derivative of the amount of aid. They don't exist without U.S. aid. So if their ability to contest or to have this expectation is entirely as a result of U.S. aid, then as a result, U.S. aid itself directly impacts what some sort of solution would come to, no? Like if we pull aid, let's say we don't pass said package, then actually a diplomatic solution looks a lot more likely. Now, of course, I'm not saying that's just, and if I were them, I would be furious as well. But we also have to consider our own interests here.
Well, the question is, what are they capable of doing, and what do they want as a just solution? Yeah. If they come to a conclusion that they themselves have had too many loss of lives and that they want some compromise that is short of a just peace, that's very different than us pulling aid and forcing their hand, which sets a horrible precedent, in my view, for China and Taiwan, for Russia continuing the action of aggression. I mean, Russia took Crimea, now they're taking Donbass. What's next? I mean, if we don't stand up and say, as a big power, you can't just take a little power or other country, then it undermines the rule of law in the international system.
Congressman, to wrap up here, let me ask you a couple of political questions. So you've endorsed President Biden's reelection. You're involved in, his, what did you call it, his advisory council?
Yeah. Now Kyle and I are on the same side, right? I saw the Kyle in your clip. I mean, exactly, I said maybe he's going to be on the advisory board.
Kyle supporting Marianne Williams. You're not supporting her in the primary, so it is a very different position. But I wanted to ask you, why do you think it's so close in the polls right now with Trump? I mean, you've got some indications, you got some top line numbers. It's like unemployment's low and the president's obviously out there selling the economy, but the American people are also really not feeling it. And they've seen a lot of the support, the social safety net support that they enjoyed during the pandemic that actually helped a lot of people. That's been stripped away and stripped away and stripped away under the Biden administration. So what is your just sort of political analysis of why he is struggling so much to get any kind of a lead on a guy who's facing like 91 different criminal charges?
Three reasons. One, gas is still high. I mean, gas in my district is $5.50. I was in Nevada trying to get young people for the president. It's still over $5. Housing costs are very high. Rent is high. The interest rates now are at 7 to 8%. So if you're a young family and you want to buy a home or try to get a mortgage, that's hard. If you have credit card debt, that's hard. So we look at the macro numbers of unemployment low, what this president has done to bring manufacturing jobs back. But when you look at individual families and young people, there's still a lot of economic stress in the system. The second part is that there is a total anger with the status quo. That's why I'm talking about this political reform plan. So if people say, oh, both sides are bad, all of Congress is corrupt, we have to show, no, there's a difference. We are for principled leadership and cleaning up the system and getting PAC money out and big money out, and the other side is not. I believe there is a difference, but we have to communicate that. And the final thing is, look, you've had 40 years of the hollowing out of the working and middle class in this country. This president is bringing that manufacturing back, but we've got to tell the story and say, look, it's just the first step. We've got decades more work to do, but there's 40 years of decline that we're trying to reverse.
Well, Congressman, we appreciate your transparency and your engagement as always. It's very rare here in Washington decision. We appreciate it very much. So thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
Emerson.
Appreciate it.
Always great to see you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.